I'm Paul Allen and I'm here to tell you another story, incredible story that has to do with an incredible character. Because everyone happens to be someone, and maybe someone important, exceptional. But it rarely happens that you are someone, even if you are not nobody. Nobody because you're a quiet nobody, but you are being many times at the same time and with many identities different. And so, even if you are a doctor, a pilot, a lawyer, you are one that they write books about and make headlines. Because this is the incredible story of an American who is called Frank Abagnale. At the cinema, in this film Try and Catch Me, with which Steven Spielberg tells his life, Frank Abagnale has the face Leonardo DiCaprio's charming young man. In reality, this is not the case. Not only the film romance a lot their biography of Abagnale, but it is obvious that this is cinema. But Frankie just doesn't have that face and that charisma. Frank William Abagnale, Jr., is an American like many, with an oval face, a little plump, a smile a little obtuse, let's face it, like a fool. A tuft of straight hair squeezed across the forehead starting at a nice straight line, a good boy. Looking at him like this, no one would say he's a crook. And obviously, no one would say that about any scammer, otherwise goodbye profession. If one had it written on his face that it is unpunished lie, no one would believe him anymore, like would screw the others over, impossible. But Frankie Abagnale is not just a con man, with the foolish face like so many scammers. He is one of the biggest scammers in the world, one of the most brilliant. Wanted by the police in 26 countries of the world that they would like to arrest him at all costs, especially France, the United States. And when they arrest him, when they catch him, he's their screw again because he runs, until they catch him still. Someone like that, someone so good at screwing people over and getting high always believe what is not, with this talent must born to be. He can't just have learned from someone, either decided to do certain things. Fraudsters like Frankie are born, in fact he is born. Frank begins to exercise his talent from a very young age and his first victim is his own father. Frank loves Mr. Frank William Abagnale Sr. He loves his mother too, but when she decides to divorce and leave, the father falls into a deep depression. Even Frankie, who up until then had been a son model, never a trouble, never a sorry, never a problem, he becomes a rather restless teenager. He lives in the white part of the Bronx in New York, we are in the early 50s, and hangs out with a gang of street kids who above all steal. But he's not like that, he's restless, he doesn't have many scruples, he do all at once, but not like that, no tearing it apart with violence. He's a smart and bright guy, and to get something wants to use the brain not the hands. Frank works as a clerk in a warehouse, but his salary is not enough. To get to work, his father lent him his Ford and the credit card he uses to get gas. Frankie buys a lot of things with credit card, tires, spare parts for the car. He pays everything to his father's credit card, then he resells the purchases the employees of the distributors with whom he agrees, they do half and half. So he gets money to go out with girls, and his father, at the first check, finds himself with a hole in some $1,000. Not the best as a scam, and in fact his father discovers it and sends Frank to a Catholic school for young difficult boys, which is somewhere between a boarding school and a sort of prison. Frank stays there for a year, then he comes home to find his parents permanently separated, and then he takes all his savings, $200, and decides to go to New York, to live alone. That year spent in the boarding school for young Catholics, after his father's credit card scam has him taught something, that scams need to be done better, for more money, and above all you don't have to find out. In New York, Frank lives in the house of a friend he met in train, and works as a clerk in an article factory stationery, takes $1.50 then, and of course it's not enough for him, but what can he do? He's just a 16-year-old suburban kid without a diploma. No, wait, it's not just that. He is Frank William Abagnale Jr., who he will become one of the greatest scammers of all time. First you change the age on your driving license, and since he's a tall big boy, who seems more mature at 10 years. Then he starts telling everyone that he has a diploma, attended excellent schools, although he does not specify which ones. Just to get a better job, but certainly not to make money, not as much as Frank would like. But the money is there, and it's right there at hand, they're in the bank, and they're not yours, of course. He just opened an account, the bank also gave him a blank checkbook, and checks are known to exist like money. Just write a figure on them and sign them, and it doesn't matter if there is no money in the account, another opens from another part, perhaps with a false identity, and it does not matter if the bank sooner you can find out. They can't get you arrested if you're not there anymore, and they don't you call more like that, in short, collect and run. Now escape and travel throughout the United States, opening current accounts, and issuing false checks is not easy, sooner or later someone gets suspicious. But if you were a professional to do just that, move around the country. For example, if you were a Pan Am pilot, one of the American Airlines, would you travel the length and breadth of the country, and you should change payroll checks for example? Frankie spends some time studying the behavior of pilots and flight attendants who usually stay at Commodore Hotel in New York. He also interviews many of them, saying that he is a student who Laura writes a thesis about them. Then he goes to Pan Am, says that their hotel laundry has them having lost the uniform, he asks for another one. Contact a company that makes documents, pretends to be a Pan Am official who wants to commission new documents, and you go for a test pass, in your name his, which completes with a coat of arms of Pan Am found inside the box of a model bought in a shop of toys. Finally, he obtains a fake flight license. From that moment, he becomes Frank Williams, airline pilot who doesn't drive planes of course, but flies there for free, taking advantage of a program of discounts and permits, reserved for the pilots. There is a photograph of Frank Abagnale, or rather Frank Williams, in his pilot uniform, tall, smiling, a fool's face with the parting on one side, the blue uniform, a white shirt with the black tie, the cap under his arm, and the pilot's chevrons clearly visible on the cuff. But across the photograph there is red writing, "Imposter," with even the exclamation mark at the end. Because by dint of opening accounts and changing checks for everyone the United States, despite doing it right with real addresses, where he doesn't live though, real fake signatures, a lot of people who he says he knows him, from his friends to all the pilots hostess that Frank gets on his travels. But yes, of course, I know a pilot well, I drank at a beer, I took a trip, I've been to bed. The banks began to have suspicions and the police tried to see more clearly without success, because obviously Frank Williams does not exist. The real Frank Abagnale, has stopped flying and is tucked away in Atlanta, Georgia. As a pilot he retired, although now he only 18 years old, a kid who pretended to be a pilot of great experience. In Atlanta, Frank finds home in an upscale neighborhood frequented by the good bourgeoisie of the place. They are all esteemed professionals, and one day he gets a visit of a neighbor, a doctor. What does he do, Frank? But he's a doctor too, a pediatrician. What a combination. Frank is good at pretending. Become a friend of the doctor, and when he invites him to do a tour of his hospital, Frank learns they are looking for a fixed-term doctor and gets hired. So from that moment, despite always being an 18-year-old kid without even a diploma, Frank becomes Dr. Williams' pediatrician. Everything he knows about medicine he learns by listening to the other doctors, and reading a few books in the library of the hospital. His is a supervisory job, so he doesn't have to actually do something, and in any case, when he gets in trouble, gets away with a joke. Everyone laughs and considers him a slightly crazy doctor. It ends there. In exchange for this nice doing nothing, you get a nice salary as head of pediatrics. Then, one day, he happens to receive a child who is himself fractured a leg. Frank doesn't even know where to start. Fortunately, an extension arrives to whom he entrusts the work. He's a supervisor. No, let him do the inside so he sees how he does. Then another child arrives, a newborn who doesn't. He manages to breathe, and once again Frank manages, giving up everything to another, but the child risks dying. Frank began to have some problems. Okay, that's a weird doctor, a little crazy, but it seems he doesn't know anymore, just do its job. So Frank takes advantage of the arrival of another doctor, yes, dismiss and leave willingly. He decided to be a con man because he didn't want to take the money with violence. Now he doesn't want to run and risk kill someone. There is something else it can pretend to do, without being too dangerous. After Georgia, Frank moves on to Louisiana, where he meets a stewardess he had been having an affair with when he still claimed to be a pilot. Make up an excuse for losing your job, get engaged to her, and when the girl introduces him to a lawyer friend, Harvard graduate, and this one asks him what job he does, Frank says lawyer, of course. And graduated where? But at Harvard, of course. The pattern, we know by now. Frank studies something about the state law of Louisiana. You learn fast because very smart, not could do what it did if it wasn't, and pass the exam to train in that state. He even gets a job in the DA's office, that one that should put guys like him in gaol, with a salary of $13,000 a year to finish working as usual. Meanwhile, he has resumed an old habit that his stewardess friend reminded him, pose as a pilot. He does it again. He travels, and one day he gets to Utah. Yes, he realizes that he doesn't like being a prosecutor in Louisiana more. Prefers the Mormon state to the Deep South. There are also a lot of pretty girls, so he pretends to be a teacher in sociology and gets hired at Brigham and University, $1,600 per semester. Teaching for him is not difficult. Have students read chapters of a book, then explain again what he learned from them. He gets fed up with that too and flies to California, where he starts over to circulate false checks for a total of $100,000 that added to all the others, deposited in various accounts, secret currents scattered around the United States, which contain an amount of at least $2 billion and has not yet 20 years. But one day he makes a mistake. He falls in love with one girl another stewardess known in his travels. It's a mistake not to fall in love naturally, but to tell her everything. He loves her, he wants to marry her, he wants to be honest with her, and so he tells her that he is a con man, fake pilot, fake doctor, fake lawyer, fake teacher and check forger. He loves her, but maybe she doesn't, because she immediately reports him to the FBI. Frank escapes, resumes traveling as a false pilot for all over the world, meanwhile cashing checks thanks to the father of another girlfriend of his and one that Frank really likes, who owns a printing shop and prints him checks in the name of Pan Am, believing him to be a high official. He almost makes an agreement with Pan Am itself to manage the stewardess checks, so he cheats on others $300,000. Not that all this goes unnoticed, the police are looking for it and the FBI is also looking for him. They call him the James Bond of the air and they put a top FBI agent behind him, the agent special, Giuseppe Cia. Frank Abagnale gets arrested a lot of times, but he always runs away. They pick him up at the Boston airport, but don't recognize him and let it go. As soon as he comes out of the airport security, he gives the security officer uniform and steals another $65,000 from airport boxes. Joseph Cia locates it in France. Montpellier finds it and he is arrested by the French police. Frank stays 6 months in the prisons of Montpellier, a large block of flats, maximum security where guarded specials like him they sleep on the floor, and almost die of it, malnutrition and pneumonia. Then they transfer him to a prison for another 6 months Swedish to recover and then they send him to the United States where Agent Cia is waiting for him. At the New York airport, however, Frank escapes, unscrewing the toilet bowl. He slips into the hold, he knows how to do it, why he knows planes well, and leaves. He runs off to Montreal, Canada where he has a secret account. He would like to go to Brazil where there is no extradition and Irish have it pretty good, but Canadian police he tracks him down and arrests him. They hand him over to the FBI, who sent him to a penitentiary in Georgia, but he runs away again. He makes two warders believe he is an inspector undercover penitentiary that he had himself put inside on purpose and they let him go. In the end, however, the Cia people manage to catch it and keep it narrow until the trial where he is sentenced to 12 years. He makes 5. Then it's the FBI to get him out because he serves a consultant in leg like him to fight bank fraud. Now Frank William Abagnale Jr. indefinitely free and also rich, but he made his money legally. He is the owner of Abagnale and the partner in charge own anti-fraud consultancy for large companies. There's a photo of him in the company brochure. Now with white hair, but still with that face oval, straight hair neatly coiffed, and that incredible deceptive foolish smile.